Warning: the following video contains explicit language which may be offensive to some viewers or inappropriate for children. The content within this video is intended for mature audiences only.
Disclaimer. The views and opinions expressed in this video are those of my own and do not necessarily reflect the views or positions of any other person or group of people. They do not purport to reflect the opinions or views of any group of people, person, or fanbase or its members. This video and the presentation of material therein do not imply the expression of any opinion other than mine.
Hello and welcome to this video. Hope everyone out in the world is doing well. Hope everyone's having fun. Today we are starting season 2 of Rabbits. The intro is changed up a little bit from season 1, so probably first couple episodes we'll play through the intro just because it is just a little bit different and it kind of gives you an idea of how we're going to be going in this season. So let's do it.
We're going to need to stay sharp if we end up finding the Traveler.
You believe your friend was playing rabbits?
She started seeing mysterious men in gray.
What's going to happen then? We're going to play this game.
It should be just up ahead. Once you open the door, you can take off the blindfold.
The streets were red, then black with blood.
That sounds poetic. Where are you now?
The bottom line isn't money or purpose.
Yeah, like I said, there's some stuff in there from season 1 and some stuff there from season 2. Or I think it's kind of a culmination of season 1, The Path, and season 2. It's just kind of mixed all together.
It's inspiration.
Are we still gonna have sex?
I'm afraid not.
A lot of people don't understand the power they're dealing with. I need you to promise me you'll only use these cards for good.
So that is the intro for season 2.
It was around late spring 2010, and I was working as a server at the original Red Robin in Seattle. One night, it was raining pretty hard. Well, it's Seattle, so it's raining a lot of nights. But I remember it was raining like crazy on this night specifically. The night my friend Dana and I stepped outside the restaurant and ran over to a nearby bus shelter to call a cab.
Yeah, this is... I love the way that all these start out. They start out so innocent.
There was a poster for a movie behind the plexiglass of the bus stop wall. That movie was called Scott Pilgrim vs. the World. On the poster were the stars of the movie, Mary Elizabeth Winstead and Jesse Eisenberg. Dana and I both loved the Scott Pilgrim graphic novels, and we were looking forward to the movie, but I noticed that something was wrong immediately. Michael Cera was the star of Scott Pilgrim vs. the World, not Jesse Eisenberg. I asked Dana what she thought was going on, but she just stared at me, confused. Jesse Eisenberg is Scott Pilgrim. Michael Cera is playing Mark Zuckerberg in that Facebook movie. She shook her head and asked me what the hell was wrong. I felt the world slowly start to spin and realize that something was very wrong.
I've had days like that. I've had that kind of experience when I've went places, especially on hikes, where you get this sense of familiarity that's completely foreign.
That something was rabbits. From the Public Radio Alliance in Minnow Beats Whale, you're listening to Rabbits. I'm Riley Bennett. Stay with us.
And the introduction of a new lead. Riley Bennett is an interesting character. It should be noted that the first time I listened to this I was also reading Nosferatu by Joe Hill, and there are thematic beats that are real similar. And when I was reading the book and listening to this podcast, there are some really interesting where my brain blended the two stories together, and it made for a really interesting interpretation. Because when I thought about it, I had to first of all, I had to unweave this rug and figure out what strings with what rugs. So it was kind of interesting. And if you're a reader, whether you read read a old school hard copy or a Kindle or audiobooks or whatever, I do recommend Nosferatu by Joe Hill. Great book. Scary. Kind of weird. I think it's more weird than scary. Kind of like Rabbits. Rabbits is really weird. And it's weird enough that it kind of dulls the scary. I mean, that make any sense? Maybe, I don't know.
Separating biology and behavioral sciences from architecture is a big mistake.
It's kind of a game within the game.
Welcome to Season 2 of Rabbits. A lot has happened since Carly Parker told us her story. Her search to find out what had happened to her best friend, Yumiko Takada, had ended with Season 1. But that's not the end of the story of Rabbits. Not even close. After I'd finished listening to Season 1 of the Rabbits podcast, I immediately got in touch with the producers. I sat down with Hollis Adams Lane, Terry Miles, and Nick Silver and told them a new story. My story.
That's one of the things that, and I've said it over and over in past videos through Season 1, this incorporating of real people within the story. It's just, I just love the way they do that.
But first, let's get caught up on what happened last season on Rabbits. If you haven't heard Season 1, it's time to hit stop and go listen to those 10 episodes right now.
Which we've already done. Hopefully people have went and found the Rabbits podcast website and listened to it without my commentary. So, well, that's a thing.
At the end of the first season of Rabbits, Carly Parker ended up in Canada with a man she called Jones. She'd finally found her friend Yumiko, who had disappeared under suspicious circumstances, and Carly discovered that she herself may have actually won the 9th iteration of the game. For those of you unfamiliar with Rabbits, it's a game. It's not actually called Rabbits, officially. In fact...
Yeah, that's the only slowdown in this episode, is because we have to kind of recap, or we don't have to, but the people that did Rabbits kind of have to do this recap for the people that haven't listened to season 1 or are in the process of going back and listening to season 1, to give them just enough information to whet their appetite to watch season 1, or listen to season 1, not watch. Unless you got some really good psychedelics, then you can watch it. So this is kind of, this first episode is going to kind of do that, kind of flip, kind of set up, give us a summation of season 1 and get into before it gets into season 2.
It's not actually called anything. It's just the game. I'm not going to go into all kinds of background details about Rabbits here in this intro. You can learn everything you need to learn by listening to season 1 of the podcast. But I'll do my best to provide enough context to explain the game's connection to the events that led us to creating this, the second season of Rabbits, as we go along. The first thing I'd like to do is interview the person who brought me into the studio last year when I called in and asked to talk about Rabbits.
Is it?
And yeah, like I said, this is kind of like the first episode of any second season that you get. You're trying to catch people up and make sure they're there.
Chair actually comfortable?
It's it's not bad at all, thanks.
Okay, cool. Are you ready?
I am ready.
That's Nick Silver, founder of the Public Radio Alliance, cousin of Terry Miles, and close friend of Carly Parker.
Well, if you don't mind, I'd like to start with the day we met.
Sounds good.
Okay, so it was shortly after the first season of Rabbits ended.
Right after the final episode aired, if I remember, right?
Yeah, I got in touch pretty quickly.
You were concerned.
I was.
You were worried that the podcast might not be real.
Exactly. I thought parts of the podcast were fictional, and I found that confusing.
And that's interesting. Within the Rabbits universe, I could see that, but as a viewer or listener from outside that universe, it's kind of letting us, the listener, Riley is kind of being us, the listener, from being outside this universe.
Which is most likely because we had to change a couple of the names and adjust locations and situations in order to keep people safe.
That makes sense.
Do you think that's what was responsible for your confusion?
And basically, Nick Silver is kind of doing he's the welcome party, I guess you would say, welcoming us, the viewer or listener. Excuse me, I keep saying viewer, but listener. You could be a viewer depending on if you have any psychedelics handy, but the listener, he's kind of welcoming us into the second season of this world.
That and something else.
What?
The fact that I'm pretty sure Rabbits is real.
Ba-ba-ba-bum.
At this point, I've asked Nick to address a few of the events that had allegedly taken place during the final episode of season 1 of this podcast.
Okay, so about the Magician's Arcade.
Basically, we're recapping at this point. And we're not only we're recapping, we're kind of filling in details that Carly in the first season kind of skipped over or missed out on or didn't see because of everything going on in her life.
What about it?
It's still there.
Yeah.
It didn't disappear at the end of the first season of Rabbits.
No, it did not.
What happened?
When the first season of the Rabbits podcast was airing live, there was a lot of attention up here in Seattle. People walking around one particular area looking for an arcade, one very specific arcade.
The podcast premiered at #1 on Apple Podcasts, so that makes sense.
Right, and that was great for us that so many people were interested in rabbits, but it turned out that it wasn't so great for the magician.
Why not? You'd think he'd be happy with all the new customers.
Oh, you really don't know the magician.
Right, I suppose.
And this is the reason why I'm kind of endeared to the magician. What he goes through in season 1 and what he goes through in this season. But when we get done with season 2 and we get into the first Rabbits novel, this is kind of what really endeared the magician to me.
They don't.
Yeah, so as part of a deal the magician made with Carly in order for her to use his voice on the podcast, he demanded that she tell the audience that the arcade had disappeared at the end of the show. He was trying to avoid unwanted visitors.
That's smart.
Mm-hmm.
So the arcade is still there?
Well, not exactly at the moment.
What do you mean?
It's still there, but it's currently locked up. Padlocks and chains have been on the doors for more than 6 months.
Why do you suppose that is?
I have no idea, but it sucks because I don't have anywhere to play Robotron anymore.
Shit, the magician really does have a Robotron machine?
He has everything.
Which for me would be very few games. I like a lot of the games from my childhood, games like Pac-Man, Space Invaders, Venture, Joust, stuff like that. But I don't see any real super desire to go back and play these games. So yeah, it's kind of a 6 one way, half dozen the other. But if somebody has all the games, that means they have the ones that I would like, the ones somebody else would like. It's kind of cool.
The second thing I'd like to discuss connected to the end of the first season of Rabbits is something that's also related to the Magician's Arcade. In the final episode of the first season of Rabbits, Carly Parker claimed that she'd entered the Magician's building only to discover that the arcade was no longer there. That location was now some kind of convenience store. We know now that wasn't true. It turns out there actually was no convenience store. But what about the other thing that Carly Parker claimed had happened in that location?
In the final episode of season 1, Carly Parker claimed she'd discovered the circle on a Defender 2 machine.
Yeah, that's right.
She said the circle listed Hazel as the winner of the 8th iteration of the game, and somebody named Parker Carlson as the winner of the 9th. Nick?
Are you going to explain the circle and Hazel in case there are listeners here who missed the first season of Rabbits?
Yeah, though the recap from a third party is kind of interesting. I like the way they set that up to give us the exposition that we need if we haven't listened to season 1 and help set up for season 2.
Hazel is allegedly one of, if not the greatest Rabbits player who ever lived, and the circle is like a list of Rabbits' high scores, a living document of the players who have won each of the 9 iterations of the modern version of the game. The circle appears...
I like the term living document, and especially, I know people refer to like the Declaration of Independence and the U.S. Constitution as living documents, but a living document in digital form. To me, that's just kind of like an evolution, a growing, an advancement of technology and how we view things.
It's at the beginning and end of each cycle of the game.
Exactly right.
Thanks. In this case, Carly Parker saw the circle on that Defender 2 machine.
Right, except that she's not certain she actually did.
What do you mean?
It could be all kinds of cool and weird rabbity things.
I mean, when I spoke with Carly Parker 3 days after we'd aired the final episode, she told me that she had no memory of finding anything on any Defender 2 machine.
But we clearly hear her voice describing that event in her narration section.
Yeah, Carly said that she couldn't explain it. Maybe it was due to some lingering effect of the drugs or sleep deprivation, but she claimed that she had no memory of recording any of that audio.
Which goes into seeing how much further the rabbit hole is, how much deeper the rabbit hole is.
So, how would you explain it?
Well, maybe like Carly said, it was the drugs, or maybe somebody manipulated that final audio somehow and then sent it to me, or maybe she forgot for some other reason.
What other reason? Nick?
Sorry.
I think Nick knows, but he isn't willing to spill the beans.
You'll have to ask Carly, I'm afraid.
Okay, so no circle indicating that Carly won the game, and no disappearance of the Magician's Arcade?
Well,
Bingo.
The first part remains unclear, but as to the second, like I said, the magician did ask both Carly and myself to find a way to convince people that the arcade was no longer there.
So people wouldn't come looking for it.
Exactly. I imagine, from what we know of the magician from season 1, that he's not a real big people person.
Exactly.
And all of this explains why nobody else has reported seeing a version of the circle with Hazel listed as the winner of 8 and somebody named Parker Carlson listed as the winner of 9?
Yes, I suppose it does.
So, the Magician's Arcade, although locked up tight, is still exactly where it was before. It didn't magically pop out of existence and get replaced by a convenience store. And it sounds like the circle, that mysterious list of winners of the game unofficially known as rabbits, may not have actually appeared with Carly's name listed as the winner of the 9th iteration.
Which comes into great play once we get deeper into season 2.
So, if that's the case, what the hell happened? I asked Nick if he'd ask Carly if she'd be willing to explain what had happened at the end of the last season of Rabbits, in her own words. Sadly, Nick said that at the end of the first season of Rabbits, Carly had told him that she was uninterested in continuing any Rabbits-related exploration or reporting.
Yeah, which, after listening to season 1, you can understand why.
I begged him for just 5 minutes with Carly. He told me if I find her, I could ask her whatever I wanted. So far, I haven't been able to track her down. So, we're on our own, but we're not without resources. We have the first season of this podcast as our guide, and we have something else. Something that definitely appears to be connected to the game. We have what happened to me.
And yes, that all that set up for probably the last 8 to 10 minutes is something we're going to need to hold on to in the back of our little brains.
And no, it's not the fact that Jesse Eisenberg was featured in that poster for Scott Pilgrim instead of Michael Cera. The next day, I went back to that bus stop to take a picture, but there was no movie poster. It was an ad for Calvin Klein. I'm going to go further back. I'm going to start with something that happened when I was visiting Korea with my father. He was considering a job over there.
This is one of the places where this kind of overlaps with Nosferatu.
It was 2005, the year of Hurricane Katrina, and the year that YouTube was born. At the time, I was into games in a big way. Obsessed, actually. The PlayStation 3 was still a few months away, but Microsoft was getting ready to release their follow-up to the wildly popular Xbox.
See, the thing is one of the things that I enjoy is a lot of your main characters in Season 1, Season 2 are gamers. As somebody who's married to a gamer, and one of my closest childhood friends is a gamer, I kind of expect them at any moment, to kind of stumble into something like this, some kind of alternate, But even though we all know it's fiction and all, but you got that kind of, I've got that kind of imagination where you hope, just a little bit that maybe there's something out there. Just because that's the way my brain works, the way it operates.
Imaginatively named the Xbox 360. The promotional campaign for the new platform began months before the official release. The centerpiece of this campaign was an alternate reality game called Our Colony. Similar to the way
I have never actually tried to look that up to see if that was a real thing or if it's part of the Rabbids mythos. I may have to do that, look it up, just to see if it's a real game, because they incorporate so much real within this fantasy. It's done really well.
Wildly successful ARG called I Love Bees was created to promote the video game Halo. The purpose of Our Colony was to promote Microsoft's updated platform. Although not nearly as influential or successful as I Love Bees, Our Colony did have some fun puzzle craft, and it functioned as a gateway into the world of alternate reality games for a lot of young gamers.
See, which I've read stories, and there've been different concepts where video games were used to find people with certain skill sets. The movie The Last Starfighter, though that movie was a video game based movie in the 80s and was made on a shoestring budget, it's still a decent enough movie, and it follows that premise of using a video game to look for somebody or somebodies with a particular skill set.
In the end, however, it was still just viral marketing. Or was it? After Our Colony, Microsoft commissioned another series of viral marketing campaigns, including something called Hex 168. 168 is 360 in hexadecimal. On October 13th, 2005, members of the Team Xbox forums discovered the Hex 168 website via strange messages posted by someone called Lutz.
See, that's another thing I should probably go check out, see if that Hex game is a real game or not, or if it's, you know, what's it about if it is.
The website was filled with images of obscure conspiracy theories, and it was eventually revealed that it was a contest offering people a chance to win one of 300 Xbox 360s. Another of the viral marketing campaigns connected to the launch of the new Xbox was OriginXbox360.com. This website was, interestingly, hosted by talking rabbits.
I don't remember that. That's something that's just, see, there are these puzzles, these pieces they throw out there that you just kind of wonder one way or another how, you know, it's just interesting, is trying to separate the fact from the fiction. That's just great. I love puzzles like that.
So, what does all of this stuff have to do with me over in Korea in 2005? And more importantly, what does all of this have to do with rabbits?
And we'll go ahead and call this video here. Like I said, this is gonna be a fun ride. And there's information in season 1, The Path, and season 2 that it's going to reoccur in when we finally get to the first novel. So until next time, be good, be safe, have fun, peace.
It's 10 p.m. Do you know where your children are?